Tai Kim leaned closer to his holographic display, his eyes narrowing as he studied the ancient cave paintings from Proxima B. The soft blue glow of the hologram lit up his tired face, highlighting the dark circles under his eyes from countless hours of research. As the lead archaeologist at the Galactic Research Institute, he had dedicated his life to understanding alien civilizations, but these discoveries were unlike anything he'd ever encountered. The paintings showed tall, muscular figures standing in poses of battle and protection. What made them remarkable wasn't just their appearance, but the fact that identical images had been found on worlds that had never made contact with each other. Some figures held spears or shields, while others stood with arms spread wide, as if shielding smaller alien figures behind them. Another late night, Jae-yun Park's voice made him jump. His research partner walked into the lab, carrying 2 cups of steaming coffee. She placed one beside him and peered at the display, still trying to make sense of these warriors. Taiwan nodded, gratefully taking the sip of coffee. "Look at this one," he said, zooming in on a particular image. "The warrior stands exactly like the ones we found on Kepler 186f, right down to the way they hold their weapons. But these civilizations were separated by thousands of light years. They couldn't have copied each other." Jae-yun set down her coffee and began pulling up more images on her own display. Soon the lab was filled with floating holograms showing similar paintings from different worlds. The images spanned 12 planets across 3 spiral arms of the galaxy. Each one depicted the same basic scene: tall, 2-legged beings protecting smaller alien species. "The dating tests are conclusive," Jae-yun said, checking her data. "These paintings were all made between 15,000 and 20,000 years ago. The oldest ones show the warriors arriving from the sky in what looked like metal vessels." Taiwan stood up and walked through the holograms, studying each image carefully. "And it's not just the ancient artwork. Modern species on these worlds still pray to these figures before going into battle. They call them different names: Sky Warriors, Star Guardians, the Protectors. But the descriptions are always the same." He stopped at a recording from a recent diplomatic meeting. An alien representative from one of the worlds was describing their battle rituals. The alien's translator conveyed their words: "Before any conflict, we paint the image of the ancient guardians on our armor and weapons. We pray to them for strength and protection, as our ancestors did. The legends say they came from the stars to save us in our time of greatest need." Jae-yun pulled up more recent documentation. "Look at these modern religious texts from different species. They all describe the warriors as tall beings who walked on 2 legs, with arms that could wield weapons or embrace those in need of protection. Some even have preserved ceremonial armor sized for beings much larger than themselves." Taiwan felt a shiver run down his spine as he looked at the measurements. "Jae-yun, have you noticed something about these dimensions? They're not just similar to each other, they're almost exactly sized for humans." She finished his thought. "I know. I've been avoiding that conclusion because it seems impossible. How could ancient humans have visited all these worlds? We've barely started exploring space now." Their discussion was interrupted by an urgent message flashing across their displays. Both researchers fell silent as they read the notification. After decades of isolation, humanity was about to make first contact with the Galactic Council. Representatives from various alien species were on their way to Earth. "We should be there," Taiwan said, already gathering his research materials. "If these paintings really do depict humans, we need to see how the alien delegates react when they meet us face to face." Jae-yun was already sending requests through official channels. "If we're right about this, first contact might be very different from what everyone's expecting. Instead of meeting strange new species, we might be meeting civilizations that have been praying to images of us for thousands of years." As they rushed to prepare for the historic meeting, Taiwan took one last look at the cave paintings. The ancient images seemed to watch him with timeless eyes, as if they had been waiting for this moment. Somewhere in the galaxy, Alien species were preparing to meet beings they had worshipped for millennia. While on Earth, humans had no idea they were about to discover their own forgotten legacy among the stars. The mystery of how and why humans had visited these ancient civilizations, and why humanity had no memory of these encounters, would soon transform their understanding of both human history and their place in the galaxy. But for now, Ta-1 and Jai-Yun could only gather their evidence and prepare for a first contact that might reshape the very foundation of multiple civilizations' beliefs about their protectors from the stars. The bright morning sun shone over the United Nations headquarters in New York as humanity prepared for its first official contact with alien civilizations. Tai-1 stood among the gathered scientists and diplomats, his heart pounding with anticipation. Security teams maintained a careful perimeter around the landing zone where the Galactic Council's ships would arrive. Elder Hae-Nul Lee, chosen as humanity's chief ambassador, stood at the front of the welcoming committee. Her gray hair was neatly styled, and her traditional diplomatic robes moved gently in the morning breeze. Beside her, Jai-Yun clutched a tablet containing their research about the ancient cave paintings. The alien ships appeared silently in the sky, their sleek forms catching the sunlight as they descended. 3 vessels, each different in design, settled onto the landing pad with barely a sound. The assembled crowd held their breath as the ship's doors began to open. The first aliens to emerge were tall, slender beings with iridescent skin. Behind them came shorter, stockier creatures covered in fine scales, and finally, entities that seemed to float on clouds of light. But as soon as they saw the human welcoming committee, all 3 species stopped moving. Their translators crackled with surprised exclamations in their native languages. Hae-Nul stepped forward with a warm smile, extending her hand in the traditional Earth greeting. On behalf of humanity, welcome to Earth. The lead alien diplomat, the tall iridescent being, dropped to its knees. Its companions quickly followed suit. The translator rendered their words in a tone of awe. The ancient guardians. They are real. After all our generations of prayers, you have revealed yourselves. Hae-Nul looked back at Tai-1 in confusion. He quickly stepped forward, opening his research files on a holographic display. Ambassador, we believe we can explain their reaction. We found evidence that these species have myths about beings that look exactly like humans. The alien diplomat rose slowly, its large eyes fixed on the human representatives. Not myths. History. Your images are in our oldest temples. Our warriors pray to you before battle. For thousands of years, we thought the stories of your protection were legends, but now, the being reached out with trembling hands to touch Hae-Nul's sleeve, as if confirming she was real. Within hours, news of the first contact spread across Earth and the galaxy. Tai-1's research, previously dismissed by many of his peers, became the most accessed scientific paper in known space. His communication device wouldn't stop buzzing with messages from alien researchers sharing their own evidence. Jai-Yun worked frantically to organize the flood of new information. Look at this, she called to Tai-1, displaying a 3-dimensional scan of ceremonial armor from one of the alien worlds. The proportions are exactly right for a human body. They've been making ritual armor in our size for thousands of years. The initial diplomatic meetings had to be repeatedly paused as alien representatives became overwhelmed with emotion upon seeing humans in person. Some brought ancient artifacts they had preserved, hoping to return them to their guardians. Others wanted to show recordings of their battle prayers, seeking confirmation that they had maintained the traditions correctly. Hae-Nul managed the situation with remarkable patience, but Tai-1 could see the strain on her face. During a brief break, she pulled him aside. Dr. Kim, we need to understand what's happening here. How is it possible that these species know about us? Why do they see us as divine protectors? Before Tai-1 could answer, one of the scaled aliens approached them, holding out a small crystal device. Please, its translator said, watch this recording from our Hall of History. The device projected an image of what appeared to be ancient humans in primitive spacesuits, fighting alongside the aliens' ancestors against some unseen threat. More evidence emerged throughout the day. Each alien species had similar records, stories of humans appearing in times of crisis, helping them survive disasters, teaching them to defend themselves, and then vanishing back to the stars. But there was nothing in human history about these encounters. As the sun set over New York, Taiwan sat in his temporary office, surrounded by holograms of alien art and artifacts. Jai Yun brought him a cup of coffee and sat down heavily in a nearby chair. "What do we do with this information?" she asked. "How do we tell humanity that we're apparently the guardian angels of half the galaxy?" Taiwan took a sip of coffee, studying the images around him. "We need to find out what happened to our own records of these events. Why don't we remember helping these species? And more importantly," he paused, looking out the window at the alien ships, "what does this mean for humanity's role in the galaxy now?" Outside, more alien ships were arriving hourly, all carrying representatives eager to meet the beings their people had prayed to for millennia. The simple act of first contact had turned into something far more complex, a reunion between protectors and protected, with humanity struggling to understand its own forgotten legacy among the stars. The warning came without warning. 3 peaceful worlds had fallen under attack by the Quorum, an aggressive species from the Outer Rim. Admiral Sung Min Cho stood on the bridge of the Earth Defense Force flagship Guardian, watching as his fleet prepared for emergency hyperspace jump. "Status report," he called out, his voice steady despite the tension filling the bridge. "All ships report ready, Admiral," his second-in-command responded. "The Quorum forces have already established orbital control over Nexus Prime. Civilian casualties are mounting." Sung Min studied the tactical display showing the position of his fleet. 20 Earth warships, the most advanced vessels humanity had ever built, waited for his command. In the 6 months since first contact, humanity had joined the Galactic Council and taken on the role of peacekeepers, a role that many species seemed to think was their destiny. "All ships, prepare for jump," he ordered. "Remember your training. We're here to protect civilians, not to be anyone's gods." The fleet entered hyperspace with a flash of light. During the brief journey, Sung Min reviewed the reports about the Quorum. They were a warrior species who had rejected membership in the Galactic Council, believing that strength alone should determine who ruled the stars. The fleet dropped out of hyperspace above Nexus Prime, and the scene before them made even the experienced Admiral pause. The Quorum ships, dark and angular, were laying waste to the planet's orbital defenses, but what caught his attention were the defending ships. Every surviving vessel of the Nexus Defense Force had been painted with human figures, warriors in poses of protection, exactly like the ancient cave paintings. The emergency channels were filled with what the translators identified as ritual prayers, ancient words asking for the Guardian's strength. "Admiral," his communications officer called out, "we're receiving a transmission from the surface. The Nexus High Command they're asking for humanity's blessing before their final stand." Sung Min felt the weight of history and expectation pressing down on him. He didn't want to be anyone's deity, but these people needed help, not theological discussions. "All units, battle formation Delta," he commanded. "Engage hostile forces. Protect the civilian population at all costs. Launch fighter squadrons and prepare boarding teams." The Earth fleet moved forward as one. Their weapons were more advanced than anything the Quorum had expected to face. Plasma beams cut through the attackers' shields, while point defense systems swatted their missiles from space. "Sir, incoming transmission from the Quorum flagship," the communications officer reported. The alien commander appeared on screen, its scaled face showing confusion. "What are you doing here, humans? This is not your territory." Sung Min stood tall, letting his voice carry the authority of his position. "We are here because you attacked innocent people. We are here because they asked for protection. Stand down your forces or face the consequences." The Quorum commander laughed. "You believe the old legends, that humans are some kind of divine protectors. We will show you and them the truth about strength." 3 Corum destroyers turned to attack the Guardian directly. Some men watched calmly as his gunners targeted their weak points, exactly where their alien allies had told them to look. All batteries, fire. The Earth ships moved with precision that would have seemed impossible just months ago, but training with their alien allies had taught them much. Fighter squadrons darted between capital ships, their pilots executing maneuvers that made the defending aliens gasp in recognition, just like the moves depicted in their ancient artwork. On the surface, Earth Marines deployed to protect civilian evacuation centers. Their combat suits, ironically similar to the ceremonial armor some species had preserved, proved highly effective against Corum weapons. "Admiral," the tactical officer called out, "the Corum fleet is falling back. Their remaining ships are retreating to hyperspace." Some men nodded, but he wasn't celebrating yet. "Launch rescue operations immediately. Get medical teams to the surface. Contact the Nexus government. Tell them their people are safe." As the Earth forces moved to secure the system, some men received messages from the defending aliens. They weren't just thankful, they were reverent. Their ancient prayers, they said, had been answered. The Guardians had returned to protect them, just as the legends promised. In his private quarters later, some men recorded his report for Earth Command. "The mission was successful," he said, "but we need to address the religious significance these species place on us. We're not gods or ancient guardians. We're just people trying to help." But today, that was enough. He looked out his viewport at Nexus Prime below, where Earth ships now patrolled alongside the defenders, their hulls still bearing the painted images of human warriors. Perhaps, he thought, being someone's guardian wasn't about divinity at all. Sometimes it was simply about being there when you were needed most. The crisis at Nexus Prime would soon become another legend, another story of humans protecting the innocent. But for Sung Min and his crew, it was just the beginning of humanity's new role in the galaxy, not as gods, but as guardians who chose to stand between the innocent and those who would harm them. The battle footage from Nexus Prime dominated every news feed across known space. Captain Yoonji Kang sat in her quarters aboard the marine transport ship Valor, watching as alien networks replayed scenes from the ground combat over and over. The recording showed her marine unit moving with practiced precision, protecting civilian evacuation sites from Corum assault forces. One clip in particular kept repeating, Yoonji leading her squad through heavy fire to rescue trapped alien children from a collapsed shelter. The camera caught her picking up 2 young aliens and carrying them to safety while her troops provided covering fire. The aliens' news anchors compared the scene to ancient religious artwork, pointing out the similarities between her pose and centuries-old depictions of human guardians. "Captain," Soo Bin Park's voice came through her door. "Are you watching the feeds again?" "Come in," Yoonji called, making space for her executive officer on the small couch. "Look at this. They're calling us the returned ones now." Soo Bin sat down, his face showing concern as they watched more footage. Every major species in the galaxy was broadcasting stories about the battle. Military analysts discussed human combat techniques with religious scholars, comparing modern tactics to ancient texts describing the fighting styles of their legendary guardians. "This morning I got 50 requests for interviews," Yoonji said, switching off the display. "Religious leaders want me to bless their troops. Military commanders want me to train their forces. Some of them are even asking for locks of my hair to place in their temples." Through her window, she could see alien ships passing by. Many now bore fresh paint showing human figures in combat poses. Some had even started copying the Marine Corps' insignia, treating it like a holy symbol. "Have you seen what they're doing planetside?" Soo Bin asked, pulling up images on his tablet. "They're building shrines using our combat footage. That clip of you saving those children. They're making statues of it." Yoonji stood up and paced her small quarters. "This isn't what I signed up for. I'm a Marine. We protect people because it's our job, not because we're divine beings." She paused at her desk, picking up a piece of alien artwork someone had given her. a detailed carving showing her unit in battle poses. "I don't like being anyone's god." Su-bin smiled gently. "We're not gods," he replied. "We're just the right people in the right place at the right time. The fact that we match their ancient legends, well, that's a mystery for the scientists to figure out." A priority message flashed on Yoonji's screen. Another quorum attack, this time on a mining colony in the Centauri sector. As she read the details, more messages arrived. The alien defenders were specifically requesting her unit, saying they needed the blessed warriors to protect them. "Suit up," she told Su-bin. "Looks like our legends are needed again." As they prepared for deployment, Yoonji watched her Marines checking their equipment. The alien maintenance crews had painted protective symbols on their combat suits, human figures in poses of strength and defense. Some of her troops had started learning the aliens' ancient battle prayers, finding comfort in the words even if they didn't believe in their divine significance. "Listen up," she addressed her unit before boarding their dropships. "I know how these people see us. I know they think we're their legendary guardians come back to life. But remember, we're Marines. We protect people because it's right, not because it's written in some ancient text." Her words were met with nods of understanding. These men and women had adapted to their unexpected role as living legends, focusing on their mission rather than the religious significance others placed on them. As they entered their dropships, Yoonji noticed alien ground crews touching their vehicles reverently, whispering prayers for protection. The sight still made her uncomfortable, but she was learning to accept it as part of their new reality. "Maybe that's what makes us suitable guardians," Su-bin said, noticing her expression. "The fact that we don't want to be worshipped, that we just want to help. Maybe that's exactly what their ancient guardians were like too." The dropships lifted off, carrying Yoonji's unit toward another battle. Below them, alien troops were already painting human figures on their vehicles and armor, preparing to fight alongside their legendary protectors once again. As they approached the combat zone, Yoonji thought about Su-bin's words. Whether they wanted to be legends or not, they had a job to do. And if their presence gave hope to those they protected, perhaps that wasn't such a bad thing after all. The legend of the human guardians would continue to grow with each battle, each rescue, each moment of protection. But for Yoonji and her Marines, it would always be about the mission, protecting those who needed help, not because they were gods, but because they were human. Jae-yun stared at her computer screen, her eyes wide with disbelief. After months of analyzing human genetic data alongside alien archaeological records, she had found something impossible. Her hand shook as she reached for her phone to call Taewon. "You need to come to the lab right now," she said when he answered. "I found it. I actually found it." The laboratory at the Galactic Research Institute was quiet at this late hour. Taewon rushed in to find Jae-yun surrounded by floating holographic displays showing DNA sequences and ancient star charts. "Look at this," she said, pointing to a particular genetic marker. "We've always wondered why humans have such unusual adaptations, our endurance, our ability to heal, our complex problem-solving skills. Everyone assumed these traits evolved on Earth, but they didn't." She brought up comparison data from various alien worlds. These markers show evidence of controlled genetic modification done thousands of years ago. Someone engineered humanity to be perfect guardians, enhanced strength, quick thinking, extreme adaptability. Taewon leaned closer to the displays. But who would have done this? And why? "That's the most amazing part," Jae-yun said, pulling up more data. "We did it to ourselves. Our ancestors had advanced space travel technology. They visited all these worlds, protecting developing species. But something happened, some catastrophe that made them return to Earth and start over. The evidence was overwhelming. Hidden in human DNA were artificial sequences designed to be passed down through generations, preserving the traits that made humans effective protectors. The modifications had become so integrated that modern science had mistaken them for natural evolution. Within days, Jai-yun found herself standing before a packed auditorium at the United Nations. Representatives from every Earth nation and dozens of alien species waited to hear her findings. "We didn't evolve to be their gods," she explained, her voice steady despite her nervousness. "We evolved to be their guardians, and they never forgot us, even when we forgot ourselves." She showed them the proof: genetic markers that matched radiation patterns from ancient alien ruins, archaeological evidence that lined up perfectly with human genetic modifications, and star charts preserved by alien religions that matched orbital calculations from Earth's distant past. "Our ancestors created a legacy of protection," she continued. "They modified themselves to be better guardians, passing these traits down to us. When disaster forced them to return to Earth and rebuild, the species they had protected kept their memory alive through religion and art." The revelation sparked intense debate across human and alien societies. Some humans struggled with the idea that their ancestors had been so advanced, while others found purpose in this ancient legacy. Alien species saw their religious beliefs validated, though in an unexpected way. Research teams began finding more evidence: ancient human space stations hidden beneath the surfaces of distant moons, the remains of settlements on Mars, far older than anyone had imagined, pieces of advanced technology preserved as religious artifacts in alien temples. In her private lab, Jai-yun worked with alien scientists to piece together humanity's lost history. They discovered records of the catastrophe, a massive solar flare that had forced humanity to retreat to Earth, losing most of their technology in the process. "But why didn't they leave any messages for us?" Ta-won asked one evening as they reviewed the latest findings. "Why didn't they make sure we would remember?" "They did," Jai-yun replied, showing him new genetic data. "They encoded the memory into our DNA, making us instinctively want to explore and protect. They knew that even if we forgot everything else, we would never lose the drive to help others." The discovery changed how humanity saw its place in the galaxy. They weren't just random explorers who happened to match ancient alien religions. They were the descendants of guardians who had shaped themselves to better protect other species, carrying that legacy in their very genes. As news of the discovery spread, more alien species came forward with their own pieces of humanity's lost history. Each story, each artifact, each ancient text helped complete the picture of what their ancestors had done and why. Jai-yun sometimes stood at her window at night, looking up at the stars. Somewhere up there, thousands of years ago, her ancestors had made a choice to become protectors. Now, through some cosmic twist of fate, humanity had rediscovered its purpose just when the galaxy needed guardians once again. "We're not gods," she would tell curious aliens who visited her lab. "We're something far more important. We're the guardians your ancestors knew they could trust. And now that we remember who we are, we won't forget again." Admiral Dong-hyun Choi stood aboard the command deck of Unity, the first joint human-alien warship, watching as crews from a dozen species worked together in perfect harmony. The massive vessel represented everything he had worked to achieve with the Galactic Protection Force, a unified defense force where humans served alongside the very species that had once worshipped them. "Status report on the Quorum front," he called out, his voice carrying across the bridge. His alien second-in-command, a tall being from Nexus Prime, pulled up the tactical display. "The Quorum fleet has withdrawn from 3 more sectors. Admiral, our combined forces are proving more effective than they anticipated." Dong-hyun nodded, studying the movement of ships across the star map. When he had first proposed integrating alien forces with human units, many had doubted it would work. The religious significance humans held for other species seemed like too large a barrier to overcome. "Show me the new defense line," he ordered, watching as the display shifted to show their current deployments. Human ships flew alongside alien vessels, their crews working together as equals. It hadn't been easy getting to this point. He remembered the early days of the Galactic Protection Force, when alien crews would try to bow every time they saw a human officer. It had taken months of training and clear protocols to establish a professional working relationship. "Admiral," his communications officer called out, "we're receiving a priority message from the Quorum High Command." The message played on the main screen. The Quorum leader, looking far less confident than in previous communications, was offering terms for surrender. Their forces had been systematically pushed back by the combined fleet's superior tactics and coordination. "They never expected us to work together like this," Dong Hyun's second-in-command observed. "They thought the religious aspects would make true cooperation impossible. Instead, the shared history they had discovered had become a foundation for partnership. Humans brought their inherited guardian traits and combat expertise, while their alien allies contributed their own unique strengths and deep knowledge of their ancient connections." Later that day, Dong Hyun addressed a gathering of human and alien officers in Unity's main assembly hall. "The Quorum surrender marks a new chapter for our forces," he began. "But our real achievement isn't military victory. It's proving that we can serve together as equals." He gestured to the gathered crews. "Yes, humans were once guardians of developing species. Yes, many of you grew up praying to images of our ancestors. But today, we stand together not as gods and worshippers, but as partners protecting the galaxy we share." The assembly hall erupted in cheers from a dozen different species. Dong Hyun saw human officers exchanging respectful salutes with alien crews who had once tried to kneel before them. Progress had been made. In his private quarters that evening, he reviewed reports from various joint operations. Human Marines had trained alien troops in combat techniques, while alien scientists had helped humans better understand their own enhanced capabilities. The exchange of knowledge went both ways. A knock at his door revealed Captain Yoonji Kang, now serving as his chief of ground operations. "The new protocols are working well," she reported. "The religious aspects are being channeled into proper military respect and cooperation." "Good," Dong Hyun replied. "We need their faith to strengthen our partnership, not create barriers between us." The protocols he had established were clear. Religious observances were allowed in private, but professional military behavior was required during operations. It had taken time, but both humans and aliens had adapted to the new standards. Looking out at the stars, Dong Hyun reflected on how far they had come. The Galactic Protection Force had grown from an uncertain experiment into a powerful symbol of unity. Humans had found a way to honor their ancient role as guardians while building true partnerships with the species they once protected. "We accept their respect," he had declared when establishing the force. "But we serve as partners, not deities. Our strength comes from standing together." Those words had become the foundation of something greater than anyone had expected, a force that protected the galaxy not through divine authority, but through cooperation, mutual respect, and shared purpose. The modern guardians had found their place in the stars, not as gods, but as equals standing together against any threat to peace. The red sun of the newly discovered planet cast long shadows across the archaeological site as Tao Wan adjusted his environmental suit. Beside him, his alien colleague Minra carefully brushed dust from what appeared to be another cave painting. After all these years, the sight of familiar human figures on an unknown world still filled him with wonder. "Look at the detail in this one," Minra said, her translator converting her musical language into clear speech. "The guardians are shown arriving from the stars, just like in my people's ancient texts." Taiwan moved closer to examine the painting. The primitive artwork showed tall, two-legged figures descending from the sky, protecting smaller beings from what appeared to be large predators. The similarities to other worlds' ancient art were striking. "Dating analysis suggests these are about 15,000 years old," he said, checking his instruments. "Right in the middle of the period when our ancestors were actively protecting developing species." Above them, the faint shapes of Earth Defense Force ships could be seen patrolling the system. This newly discovered civilization was still in its early stages, and humanity had immediately moved to protect them from both natural threats and possible exploitation by less ethical spacefaring species. Minra touched the cave painting gently. When I was young, my grandmother used to tell me stories about the human guardians. She said they would return when we needed them most. I never thought I would end up working alongside one, studying the very history I once thought was just legend. Taiwan remembered the day, years ago, when he had first discovered similar paintings on Proxima b. So much had changed since then. Humanity had not only accepted its role as ancient guardians, but had found a way to honor that legacy while building true partnerships with other species. "More paintings over here," called out one of the junior archaeologists. The team gathered around a new chamber, their lights revealing a massive wall covered in prehistoric art. The scenes showed humans teaching the native species how to make tools, build shelters, and defend themselves. "Your people still protect us," Min Ray observed, watching a human patrol ship pass overhead. "Just as the stories always said you would. Though perhaps not quite in the way our ancestors imagined." Taiwan nodded, thinking of how the Galactic Protection Force had evolved. Humans no longer served as distant, godlike protectors. Instead, they worked alongside other species, sharing knowledge and resources to maintain peace throughout known space. A message came through his comm unit, Admiral Choi requesting an update on their findings. The discovery of another world with evidence of ancient human protection had significant implications for their understanding of history. As Taiwan documented the site, he noticed something unique about these paintings. Unlike the others they had found, these showed the human figures teaching rather than fighting, passing on knowledge rather than just providing protection. "Perhaps this is why they chose to modify themselves," he mused aloud. "Not just to be better warriors, but to be better teachers and guides." Minra studied the images thoughtfully. "My species has a saying. The greatest guardian is one who teaches others to guard themselves. Your ancestors seem to understand this." The day's light was fading when they finally prepared to leave the site. Security teams had already established a perimeter to protect the archaeological evidence, and research would continue for months to come. Looking back at the cave entrance, Taiwan felt a deep connection to those ancient humans who had visited this world. They had created a legacy that spanned thousands of years and countless light years, a legacy that modern humanity had somehow managed to live up to. "Some things never change," he said softly, watching another patrol ship pass overhead. "We're still here, still protecting, still teaching, just as they planned all along." Minra touched his arm in a gesture of friendship her species used. "Perhaps that's the real miracle. Not that humans were once our guardians, but that when you rediscovered this legacy, you chose to embrace it in a way that made us all stronger." As they boarded their ship to return to the research base, Taiwan thought about how far they had come. From mysterious cave paintings to integrated defense forces, from religious awe to true partnership, humanity had found its place in the galaxy. The cycle had come full circle. Once again, humans watched over developing worlds, but this time they did so with the help and friendship of those they had once protected. Some things, it seemed, were written not just in the stars, but in the very nature of what it meant to be human.